Today I've been tearing down and rebuilding the turbo from a diesel BMW. And maybe you can too. This particular turbo is from the M47 series of engines, but it's basically the same as all of the turbos in diesel BMWs. The basics are the same. So follow along as I do all the steps with a bit of explanation about what the parts are and how the turbo works. You might find that you want to do it too one day. There's a lot to do, so we'll be moving quickly today to squeeze it all in. Let's get on with it. Start with the main parts of the turbo. We have on the left there the electronic actuator. On top, the aluminium part is the compressor housing. In the center, connecting the two impellers, is the cartridge. It's where the oil flows in and out, and on newer turbos that's where the coolant flows in to keep the bearings cool as well. And on the bottom we have the cast iron section. That's the turbine housing. That's where the exhaust flows through. Now to how it works, briefly. We have the exhaust goes in to the turbine housing, spins the impeller, and then it comes out. On the top we have the fresh air in from the air filter, and then that is spun by the compressor impeller, and that is then sent off under pressure into the engine. And now for the super tricky part of a diesel turbo in a BMW, and that is the variable geometry system, or the variable nozzle system. In the center we have the actuator, and that controls the actuator arm there on the right hand side and its pin, and that pin connects to the nozzle ring on the left. Inside that nozzle ring are the vanes, which I've coloured in orange. They're hiding inside. I've given you an X-ray view there. So by adjusting the angle of the vanes, this turbo can control boost over a very large part of the rev range on our BMWs. Preparation. This is preparation for pulling this thing apart. What I've done is I've got my favourite colour there and marked the bolts. I don't know the torque settings for any of these. I don't have a workshop manual on this turbo. So what I've done is I've marked all the bolts so that we can put them back to exactly where they were. And also you've noticed the housing, the exhaust housing there, the turbine housing, is marked with a big blob as well. Now that's just in case there's no dowel pin, no locating pin on this particular turbo. If it's a BMW original equipment turbo, it probably has some good locating pins, but if you're dealing with some sort of aftermarket or specially modified turbo, there may be nothing to mark the location of where it sits, so you need to mark it yourself. Start by removing the turbine housing, which is the big cast iron part in the bottom of this picture. Now a bit of your favourite penetrating oil there, just to make sure that things are as loose as they can be, and then we take away the very small bolts holding this together. Now they're little bolts, need an 8mm size spanner. They're not torqued up that tight. As you can see, a bit of a thump on the spanner and they come loose, mainly stuck due to a bit of rusting perhaps. And now you can see I've got to the one I can't get to. That's because the actuator has been in the way. So what we'll do is we'll just take that actuator housing out of the way a little bit so we can get to that bolt. Because I've marked all these bolts, we mark the order of them as well. So each one is marked with a number 1 to 6. So when we put them back in, the nail varnish, the marking pen, I should say, marking pen will line up perfectly once we've done them up to the correct torque. Now some may say that I should use a torque wrench, but there is no way a torque wrench will fit in there. And if you use an adapter on a torque wrench, the readings are completely useless anyway. There's not a lot of torque on these. They're mainly just to hold everything in place. The sealing is done by a gasket and by an interference fit. Now here comes the tricky part. Now there's no way this housing is coming off unless you hit it with a big hammer, and I'm not going to do that because it's cast iron and there's a good chance that will crack the cast iron. So I've developed a little system here using some galvanized nuts and some threaded rod, and you can see there that fits over the bolts that go into the top part of the turbo. The top in this picture goes into the compressor side, and it sort of spreads the load, and then I can adjust the threaded rod out a little bit, and then using some bolts that I've specially cut to just fit in the gap, I can use that to push the two halves apart. Now, for people that work on these turbos every day, they probably have a big piece of plate steel they use that's cut just to the right size, but for me, this is my improvised solution. I'd love to hear what the professionals use, but this does a nice job of pushing the two halves apart that really are stuck. They weren't going anywhere. Once you get soot and carbon build up in these diesel turbos, sometimes they're very difficult to get apart. It's not like some turbos that just have a V clamp. These are well stuck. So as you can see, keep turning that and it's pushing the two halves apart without any hammer blows, without any screwdrivers pushing in there to ruin your gaskets. So once that's apart, we take all those little improvised tools out of the way, and then we can separate it. Okay, are we ready? Over it goes. Ta-da! There we have it. Turbine housing off. And in fact, it doesn't look too bad. It's not too clogged up. It looks fully functional. Could do with a clean, of course, but I'd say there's nothing wrong with this particular turbo in that regard. You can see the vanes operating there. Yeah, of course, the next part of the job is to take out the nozzle ring. Okay, now we're removing the nozzle ring, which is this strange conglomeration with the vanes in it. Get a bit of penetrating oil in there just to see if it helps. Try and give it a wobble. There should be nothing holding that in at all, so it should just pop straight out. However, in these diesel turbos that run it with lots of soot in the exhaust, it clogs up everything. And that's great for sealing everything, but it's not good for removal. Now we'll try some light blows with a nylon dead blow hammer. That's not working. A bit of levering. That's not working. Okay, this is nozzle ring removal attempt number 2. Okay, I've gone a bit drastic here. I've got a 3-jaw puller. We're going to use that. I don't like this solution. I'd like to hear what other people have used. I want to know of a better solution. I don't like putting pressure on the bearings inside the turbo cartridge. It makes me very nervous putting that much pressure on the bearings when we're not trying to remove the bearings. So I'd really like to know a better solution that doesn't involve this, nor involves hitting with a hammer. Because of course, if you hit hard enough with the hammer and you miss, you take out some of the blades. So here we go. Let's get this thing. Let's see, will it come off? Big breath. Hold it. Yes. Perfect. We're in business. And off it comes. There we go. Okay, it's inspection time. As you just saw, under there is surprisingly soot-free. That gets a lot of temperature, especially in cars that have a particulate filter that needs to be cleaned by the engine management system, and that puts extra temperature into the turbo and into the exhaust, and that really does help keep things clean. So chances are, if you take off your diesel particulate filter, you will end up with a dirtier turbo as a result. But that ring, that VNT ring, variable nozzle ring, looks really quite good. Now to inspect, a quick inspection of the in and out oil hoses. The one on the left is the engine oil going into the turbo, and the one on the right is the drain out the bottom of the turbo. Now just check the rubber is in good condition with these, make sure there's no cracks or that it's going to break. Now one thing to note, it's often recommended that when you change your turbo that you change the inlet oil pipe, because it can get completely blocked up. If your shaft is wobbling and your cartridge needs to be replaced, then you need to replace that oil line as well. There's a couple of washers on that oil line, make sure you put them back, and if they're in pitted or bad condition then they should be replaced as well. But if your turbo is in good condition, chances are you can reuse all of the gaskets. They're made pretty tough and you'll know quickly whether they're damaged or not. Okay, we'll move on to cleaning these components. So in they go, all the exhaust side, the nozzle ring, the exhaust housing, the turbine housing, into the ultrasonic cleaner. Half an hour later at 60 degrees with some carb cleaner, and everything is a lot better. But there's still residue and there's still a little bit of carbon on there. So we'll get out our 3M scratchy pad, our Scotch-Brite pad, and just go over everything. Give it a good old rub with some more. Each time I'm doing this I'm using some more carb cleaner out of the ultrasonic cleaner. That works pretty well. And as you can see, gloves are required unless you want very, very dirty hands. Once again, we'll grab the housing, give it a good scrub just to make sure when we put it back together all of the parts match up nicely without any gunk in the way. Oh, got to have a clean sink. Okay, and finally this metal gasket is in perfectly good condition. It's got no pitting. It'll be good for another few years at least. So we'll give that a rub too and get it ready for reinstallation. Perfect. And finally, this is the harder bit to clean, I guess, because I can't just put this into the ultrasonic cleaner because it'll get liquid into the bearings and whatever. So we'll just scrape all this off, and once we've done with scraping we'll be able to try some other bits and pieces. Try a toothbrush, more scraping, get the Scotch-Brite pad out there and give it a good rub. Each time we're using a bit more carb cleaner. And there we go, that's looking a lot better. Yeah, fantastic. No more cleaning. Thank you. Now for the compressor housing removal. This is if you have a wobbly shaft and you need to replace the central section of the turbo. Now the cartridge section contains both the impellers, both the exhaust turbine impeller and also the inlet compressor impeller, and they're connected together. Now, of course, it is possible that you could replace individual impellers, but the fact is you'd need a balancing machine and they usually cost upwards of $10,000, so it's not something you're going to have at home. So first of all, we'll take off the bolts holding the compressor side on and take off the actuator housing because it was in the way, and then this should come apart easy peasy. This side doesn't even have a gasket, it just sits there. Yep, spoke too soon. Okay, let's give it a little persuasion with the dead blow hammer. There we go. Comes apart very easily, this side, even on these diesel turbos. And you can see there we have our compressor impeller on that side. Now you can buy that component separately for most turbos, and that's a lot cheaper than buying a new turbo. In this particular turbo there's nothing wrong with the compressor side. The housing is in good condition, it's not scratched up. We put it back together. You can see the locating pin, being a BMW part. It's well located, so we didn't really need to use our marking pen, but it's a good idea, good habit to get into. It should go back together nice and easily, just pressed in with fingers, and then we can do the bolts back up. Once again, we've marked each bolt number and we put them back in their respective holes, and we can do them up until the markings line up again. That'll get us pretty close to the perfect torque setting. I think doing these up, most of them match up perfectly. I think maybe some of them went half a millimeter further round than what the marking was. So really it gets you very, very close. If you find they don't line up anywhere near close, then you know something is wrong. Okay, back on with the actuator housing there. Reattach the actuator. And we're good to go. I've even marked these bolts so that I can tighten them up to pretty close to what they should be as well. There we go. Yep, everything working. And now that our turbine housing and nozzle ring are all clean, we'll put them back together. Now there's three little machined out sections on the turbine housing, and that mates up perfectly with the nozzle ring. It's got three sections there. Where the actuator connects, there's a little flat section on the housing, a flattened out section. You can see it now, right at the bottom of the screen. There we go. And that's where that goes round. I don't think you can get it wrong. It only goes in one way, so we'll just shake that in a little bit until it clicks in. There we go, all sitting nicely. Now there's a pin, there is a locating dowel pin, and it lines up with the gasket and also with the an identical mark on the cartridge. So being a BMW part number, they don't let you make a decision about where you line everything up. It's lined up for you. Now the one tricky bit here is you have to locate the actuator pin with the appropriate part of the nozzle ring, and that's the tricky bit. So have a look as you're doing this to make sure that pin goes into the ring correctly. Otherwise it will not go together nicely. Now I'm not going to tell you it's going to fall together perfectly, easily. It's going to require a bit of wiggling, a bit of looking, and a bit more wiggling. And it's still going to be a little bit tight. But take your time with this section, make sure it's nothing is sitting wrong, and even after that it's just a little tiny bit out of alignment. That pin isn't perfectly aligned, and now it's sort of half stuck, so we'll just give it a slight tap just to align the dowel pin with the cartridge. We're talking small taps here with a very, very light hammer, and there we go, we should have alignment. Let's see if we can get a closer look at that. Yeah, there's the pin, you can see everything is in alignment. Yep. Make sure the actuator is working, it's not stuck, and then you can put our bolts back in their respective holes. Okay, let's get this done up. Work your way around just to make sure it's even pressure. This isn't falling together. It does require a little bit of turning. Nothing excessive, but not nothing either. It's not like the compressor side. The tolerances are a lot tighter because the pressure inside the exhaust side is a lot higher. So you don't want any leaks on that side, so they make it fit very, very snugly. So work your way around. Got my little ratchet there to make life a bit quicker. And once you're finished, it should all the dots should line up. This is for the actuator. Now these are two pretty identical turbos, but the positions, they came from the workshop, the professional turbo repairing workshops. Would you believe they came back with their actuators in different positions? One has the position 1 millimeter different to the other. So somebody's not done it right, or maybe both of them haven't done it right. There is a Honeywell machine, or probably other brands as well, where they emulate the BMW computer so that they can locate these vanes perfectly on the fully open or fully closed position. What I've come up with is a quick and dirty way of getting this actuator set correctly. Have your actuator calibrated badly, your turbo won't come in at the right time. Maybe it'll come in 200 RPM later than you expect. So it's pretty essential. Now the way I've come up with to calibrate this is using the car's own calibration routine. Every time the car starts, it does a check. What we've done is we've taken the turbo out, put it on top of the engine here so we can connect up the harness. And as soon as you push the actuator in there, as soon as you open the doors, look what happens. Oh, there we go. Actuator actuates, and it holds with a great deal of pressure the vanes in the fully open position. So what we can do here is we can check with the turbo partly disassembled like this, we can check that that actuator pin up the top there is also in the fully open position. So actuator is saying fully open. So we need the pin to be matching that, and you can see we can turn that part of the actuator until it is sitting in just the right position. And once we have it, we'll put the nut on the end the right way around and try it again just to make sure. Give it a little tighten. Okay, let's see how that's going. Eventually this times out, so you have to hit the key again. So we'll reset it there. We'll hit the key again. There we go. Have we got the pin in the right place now? Let's have a look. Is it? We want it at the far end, but not jammed against the far end, if you like. Yeah, a little bit of adjustment there. And I think that's about perfect. Yeah, that's just where it needs to be. Now, like I said before, this is not the perfect way. There are calibration machines to do this, but my experience has been that they're not always used by the people who should be using them, or at least maybe the calibration machines need calibration. But there we go, we're in business. So we'll put it back on the bench, compare it with the one I know is working fine, and you'll notice now that just tighten that up, that it looks like it's sitting a lot more like the other one. So Now there's not a 1mm difference in calibration between the two. They look pretty much the same. We're on to the final check before we put this turbo back in the car. Just make sure that everything is rotating. We haven't somehow jammed something in our reassembly process. Bolts are all lined up with where they should be. You can see the actuator is free moving from one end to the other without jamming anywhere. So this turbo is ready to go back in. When you put the turbo back in the car, it's very important that when you attach the oil way, the top oil line, that you fill it with oil before you attach it. This section is called external cleaning and painting, but I'm just joking. This turbo is not seen. You can't see it, so there's no way I'm going to clean it and paint it, and that's all I'm going to say about that. If you feel like cleaning and painting your turbo, be my guest. Well, that was certainly a lot to cover. If you like this video, give it a like and consider subscribing to my channel to see more videos like this. Maybe not quite as long as this. Whew. If you think your friends would be interested in such a thing, please share it with them. Until next time, and don't forget, hit that subscribe circle if you haven't already.